everybody, and welcome to the official coverage of the Stairway to the Stars conference here at the Luxor in Las Vegas. We are here with our good friend and guest, Kathleen Ball. She is the author of the new book, A Grail Quest, Discovery of a Knights Templar Cave in Brazil. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Always glad to have you on the show. I'm glad to see you here. You've had a great response at your table.
Absolutely.
Here at the first day. It has been fantastic. So tell everybody a little bit about your research and how you came to researching the Knights Templar to begin with.
Well, it basically started with an NDE in 1990. I should say it jump-started with that. I believe that I had been on some sort of a quest my entire life, but it jump-started in 1990 when I was 33 years old, and I had a near-death experience. And from that time forward, I started researching just all esoteric belief systems. And, I had been a sort of a mentor of Leonardo da Vinci. I learned how to draw from his line. I used his line. And I found out that he had been involved with King Francis I in France and had been exposed to a lot of esoteric knowledge, right? So that really spurred it for me, and I dug in. I started studying the Palais des Sions and just all these different Masons, and I bumped into the Templars, right? Okay. Well, so in 2006 or 2003, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, one of them came out, and I read that. And then, of course, the Da Vinci Code came out not long after that, and then the film came out, and I was in Italy when that film came out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was over there delivering a portrait that I had done of Leonardo da Vinci to the Vinci Museum and for their permanent collection. Oh, wow. And taking a tour of students all through Europe, following the path of Leonardo da Vinci. So that led me into Amboise, France, which is where he died. And I found out that King Francis I was into all these esoteric beliefs, and that they had brought in, he was married to Catherine Medici, right? Yep. And so the Medicis got all of this stuff from the Holy Land, right? They brought back all this stuff. And I don't know if they were affiliated with the Templars or what.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if the Medicis were one of the first families to actively own the Shroud of Turin, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, they may have. It's rumored that they did.
Yeah.
And which is the line of thought that leads people to believe that that's how Leonardo da Vinci got a hold of it.
Or had possibly even made it.
It's
he didn't one of the many hypotheses.
He didn't make the material itself. That's
the image on the material.
Yeah. But he may have, he may have used a photographic process of some sort and actually done it, and I wouldn't be surprised because he was a brilliant man.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so he was really kind of the one that led me to the Templars eventually. And fast forward to 2009, I went over to France. We ended up in Dome, France. I was given the keys to the dungeon where they held the Templars. Wow. And from 1307 to 1314, and photographed all of the graffiti that was in the dungeon, right? So that was the information that fast forward 6 years later, when I actually went to Brazil and found the cave completely by accident, synchronicity, I was able to identify it because all the same symbols were in the cave. Yeah. All the same graffiti was in the cave.
Well, and even your work as a master in art history, things like that, like you have a different realm of a different way of looking at architecture, a different way of looking at the way it melds with art, and even with the graffiti that people put places. And once again, to see the matching graffiti from so many different locations, not only across Central Europe, or I guess Eastern Europe, Western Europe, but all the way over to the New World.
Right.
That's pretty incredible to be able to see the similarities.
Well, you do, because as an artist, you're trained to see, and most people don't really see. They really don't. But as an artist, I notice every single detail that is going on. I had a photographic memory almost entirely until I was in my early 30s. And so I had that ability to capture details everywhere. And so I started doing comparative studies, really, with spiritual belief systems, and India and Tibet and Africa and Egypt and Native American, North American, Native and Southern American. And I even found some belief systems of the Ainu in Japan. All the same thing. They were all teaching the same thing, which is the alchemical process that you go through. So my book, The Grail Quest, is basically my alchemical process.
Interesting.
That's basically what it is.
Well, and not many people realize that a lot of alchemy is symbolism. It was all written in encrypted ways. When COVID first started, I probably had about a good 8-9 month just deep dive into various alchemical texts on my tablet, downloading them, purchasing them, things like that. And the two things that struck me were specifically the philosophic background of it, as well as the religious background of it, and the idea of once you start reading it, it wasn't necessarily the search for how to turn lead to gold. It was how to turn this lead to gold, and how to purify your own self.
Absolutely.
And it's even to look into numerous of the locations that the Knights Templar have that are quite obviously places of initiation, built specifically for that. And when you start looking at the symbology that is at those locations, we were talking just last night, you and I, over dinner about Rosslyn Chapel, and the idea that there is an entire piece of music written from cymatic symbols that are on columns in the chapel that had been there for thousands of years. It took somebody who knew what cymatics was to go, hey, that kind of looks familiar to a solfeggio frequency.
Right. Exactly.
And going through frequency ranges and actually finding the exact same pattern that is tied to a note in the musical scale.
That's right. And it all comes down to music because it's all frequency. Everything is frequency. Everything. The only difference between your hand and this table is the frequency at which it's vibrating.
That's right.
The only difference between this dimension that we are inhabiting and other dimensions, like the angelic dimension, I learned this in my near-death experience, is the frequency at which the entities are vibrating at.
I heard a fantastic explanation from somebody at the MUFON conference this last year that I have just lifted, because it was such a beautifully simplistic explanation of three-dimensional objects cast a two-dimensional shadow.
Right.
Fourth-dimensional objects cast a three-dimensional shadow. And that just logically made so much entire sense because, regularly, you've been on the show before. I talk regularly about the fact that, yes, everything is all frequency. That we see and hear a very minimal slice of the entire spectrum. And to think that what we see and hear is processing all of it is fallacy.
But that wasn't always the case.
No.
If you go back, the ancient Egyptians documented it, and many cultures have documented that there was a time in history, often referred to as the Lemurian time, which preceded Atlantis, where we experienced all of life, what the Egyptians called it 360 senses. Right? That's the terminology, the Commission, the ancient Egyptians used. But basically what that means is that you embody everything that exists outside of you, so you know it innately. You know the existence and the makeup of a star. You know the existence and you understand the cat, the dog, the dinosaur, whatever it is that is in your world. You understand it completely. And your senses are opened up. Oh yeah. So we're now coming out of the Kali Yuga up into the Dwapara Yuga. That's one way of explaining it. Sure. We are returning to a time when we will have and be able to enable us to use all those senses again. That's why there's an increase in telepathy. That's why there's, if you and I are having this conversation,
Yeah.
we would not have had this conversation 25 years ago.
It would have been a much harder conversation to ply. That's for certain.
Absolutely.
There has been a rapidity with which this revelation, I think, has come upon mankind here in the last decade, to see the acceptance of so many different fields of study that for the longest time have been thrown into the catch-all Kleenex bin called paranormal, where even many people would say that this would burgeon on that because of some of the concepts talked about in it. But when you look at ancient civilizations, Minoa, Egypt, ancient Greece, all of these people had an intense, intimate knowledge of frequency, sound, and actively used these things in their religious spaces.
And not only that, but they used them to manipulate the elements. So they were able to literally liquefy, because they understood the makeup. Right, the subatomic makeup. So they were able to liquefy stones, which is what I believe is how the stones were put together in Egypt and also at Machu Picchu.
Where it looks like they've been melted and reconstituted.
They literally have those knobs, those little knobs. Those, to me, as a sculptor, right, I immediately identified those as keys.
Mold keys.
Right, mold keys. To keep that from slipping, right, within the mold itself. So, immediately I knew what that was. And so immediately I knew that was the reason why they were so close together. That's why you couldn't get a piece of paper through there, because they were molded right into each other.
And even the process of molding, just to talk about how, whether you're talking about molding a ring, whether you're talking about molding a coin, whether you're talking about molding concrete, these things, the methods in which it's done have been pretty well unchanged, aside from some modernization of materials, aside from, look, we have a better lubricant to coat the inside of a mold with so that we don't break as many pieces whenever we pull it apart.
Well, that's
things like that.
by the materials that you use.
Sure.
And that's subjective. It just depends on the materials that you use. They use different materials. They had a conglomerate, a cement type. And that used in the Bosnian period. That we can't even reproduce today.
We just figured out the chemical makeup of Roman concrete.
Exactly.
Just nailed it. Just within the last 6 months, they have announced, yes, we have confirmed the actual makeup. We have confirmed it. It's taken us that long to figure out how Roman concrete was made, because they live on an isthmus. They're right up the road from Mount Etna, right down the road from another volcano, they regularly have issues. It's funny how modern buildings are almost all but destroyed in these earthquakes in Italy, but the Colosseum still stands.
Exactly. And so, so does Machu Picchu, and so does, all these places that I've traveled all over the world. They're still standing, They're still standing now.
No, that's all right. The microphone was falling down there.
Okay.
But yeah.
So, I knew immediately when I went to these places initially. I didn't know how they did it, but I suspected it was some type of mold process because of the keys. And the more I travel, the more I'm convinced that that's how they did it.
Well, and the Templars specifically, even before they were the good poor knights, and even before they had their apostolic blessing from the Pope and their charge from the Pope to form an actual order, we're a conglomerate of knights who went about and found these buildings and found these building methods.
you find them all over the world, and they're not always attributed to the Templars, but they are Templar, and you can tell that they're Templar. Timothy Hogan was just talking about this in Ethiopia, and I mean all over there. India, they're in Egypt. They were everywhere. They traveled all over the globe. And so that's what my next book is going to be about, the Templar agenda.
Yeah. Well, and not many people realize that in addition to master bankers, master builders, they were amazing nauticists. They knew the ocean.
Yeah,
they knew how to traverse the ocean. And,
absolutely.
And just about every trade route out there they were a part of.
And secretly.
Yeah.
And they did it secretly. When the Templars from Portugal initially went into South America, they called it Veracruz, which means the true cross. And they told everyone when they came back into Europe that it was an island, so that nobody else would go over there and bother with an island.
Yeah. Yeah, because if there's a mainland, then there's trade. There's riches that you can go mine.
Yeah,
things
there's
like
gold,
that.
there's silver, there's blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And the whole time they were bringing back gold from my cave.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, let's get into that a little bit, because once you've actually discovered the cave in Brazil, exactly what were the Templars using that for? Because you actively went and interviewed local tribes, things like that. They had a relationship.
Yes, they did.
With the local tribe.
Yes, they did. And it's with my research, I have found that the Amazonian tribes actually either escorted or in some way accompanied them from Bahia, from the coast of Brazil, all the way into central Brazil, which is where Alto Paraíso is, which is where I found the cave. So, and that route actually is supposed to go all the way from the Atlantic to the Pacific. And recently, within the last 2 years, the Templars themselves have done a pilgrimage, and they have traversed that route that started in Central America, went up into Bahia and across, and there's Mason marks along this trail.
Oh, wow.
Templar Mason marks.
Wow.
So, so they were doing this. If my research is correct, and I'm still, of course, always looking for better ways to establish the dating, but so far, some of the symbols that are inside my cave are found in Peniche, and they were constructed in 1190.
Oh, wow.
The buildings that they're found on. So this graffiti, that's Templar graffiti, was actually etched into the sides of these buildings in 1190. And
so that was before the time of persecution.
Oh, yeah, far. And I really believe that they were going over there before the time of the persecution. I don't know how far back yet, but it could be anywhere between 1190 from my research to 1315. Anywhere in between there. With the symbols that I have found and dated in other areas, those same symbols that are in the cave tell me that they had to have been visiting back and forth between 1190 and 1315.
Wow.
So, the cave is a gold mine.
Interesting.
Yeah, the cave is a gold mine, so they were bringing gold back and forth from Brazil into Portugal for, how long? Hundreds of years, possibly.
Yeah.
And I believe this is why King Dinas, in the 1300s, while they were being persecuted, supported them and actually built a nautical school in Peniche.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Right.
And an unbeknownst nautical school, right? One that
It was totally on the QT, and I think that was done so that they could secretly travel back and forth, even as the Knights of Christ, which they later became, back and forth to Brazil, and they could continually to bring that gold back.
Yeah. And there were a couple points in this that I think really bear witness. The fact that, once again, not many people realize that there was a prolonged persecution of the Knights Templar.
Oh my God!
It didn't just like, hey, you know what? These guys don't want to help me persecute the Jewish people. They don't want to help me, wipe out my debt to them as the King of France. It wasn't an overnight thing that happened where just suddenly Jacques de Molay was was taken down and burned. They were persecuted for years.
Yeah, they were
that.
persecuted. Well, you have to remember, okay, so all the kings were broke. All the kings in Europe were broke because they had supported the Holy Wars. Okay, when the Templars lost that was their downfall. When they lost that last battle in 1290, they came back to Europe and they had no use as far as the kings were concerned.
Yeah.
Right?
You weren't protecting
crusaders.
pilgrims anymore.
Right.
You aren't.
Right. And they had become so powerful. They were the bankers, and they owned massive amounts of land all through Europe, right? So that's a threat to royalty.
Yeah.
They see that as a threat. And then you add that to the fact that King Philip owed them tremendous amount of money, a debt left over from his father, and he couldn't pay it back.
Yep.
So the first thing he did was take all the Jews' property and money and everything they had, and guess where they went? They went to Portugal, under the protection of the Templars. So did the Cathars, so did the Moors, so did Islam. They were not enemies in Portugal. Everyone was accepted. It was a
and
sovereign.
as a matter of fact, once again, the Knights Templar rightly refused the King of France when he was like, "Hey, why don't you help me roust these people out?"
Right.
And we'll just take their money and that'll wipe your debt clean. And they're like, yeah, I don't think so.
So think about for a minute, you're King Philip, right? And you owe these guys a bunch of money. And not only that, but they're also protecting people that you want to demonize.
That you want to persecute and demonize.
Okay, so you are directly a threat to what they're saying and what they want to put across to their, to their people.
And to the king's sovereignty at that point, because
you are actually damaging and potentially destroying their sovereign nation, right?
Yeah.
So the solution to that was to start a whole bunch of propaganda. That propaganda had to have been started probably 20, 30, who knows how many years before the actual downfall of the Templars. But the church's, their interest in bringing the Templars down was a totally different interest. They were becoming more powerful than the church. And they were now in Portugal. They were taking in all these people.
That was also pre-celibacy. And not a lot of people realize that. The church wasn't always a celibate institution with its priests.
Right.
So when you're talking about a priest being a knight who's tied to a royal family, now you're talking about an obfuscation of whether or not that property might belong to, pardon my language, folks, but maybe a bastard son, or whether the land still belongs to the church.
Right.
It became a real quick battle of title and who owned property rights. Was it the church's property? Did it belong to this family who built the church and who funded the church through the Knights Templar because their son was a Knights Templar? And so, there was very firmly vested interest in the name of the church, who had blessed them to begin with for the Crusades, to say, yeah, we'll go along with you because we see how title to our land may be obfuscated at this point as well.
Well, and then the fact that they were protecting the bloodline of Mary Magdalene.
Sure.
And so you add that to the mix. And the church was demonizing Mary Magdalene at that time, all the way from the 1300s. They started demonizing, or back to 300, excuse me.
Yeah, 300.
Back to 300 AD. Constantine started, doing that. And he actually deleted the book of Mary Magdalene from the canonized Bible.
Along with numerous.
Along with a very whole variety of things. But anyway, so you have these people that have become really powerful, right? They have thousands of members. They're the bankers. They're loaning the church money. They're loaning all the king's money. They're loaning. They control everything plus the land. Okay. So, and then they're saving and they're protecting all these people that you want everybody to believe.
Well, and not just that, they are sworn into not only knighthood but an order, and at that point, their religious order supersedes their familial tie.
Absolutely.
So it's like awesome that I'm part of this ruling royal family. But my loyalties lie here with the Templars.
Right.
Not even with the church.
Right.
With the Templars before anything else.
Exactly.
So
So you have that. So they want to stop them.
Yeah.
Right? So they they buddy up with King Philip, and the deed is done, and then they want to make everybody else believe it too.
Yep.
So they hit up the king in England and Scotland and everywhere, trying to get them to get on board to demonize the Templars. So at that point they went underground.
yeah.
And there's a lot of people that believe that the Templars stopped at that point. But in Portugal was the last holdout. The Inquisition did not get into Portugal until the 1500s.
Yeah.
And when they did, you know where they went. They went right straight to the Templars' headquarters in Tomar and took over the
Wow.
Convent del Cristo.
Yeah.
They dug up the Grand Masters underneath the chapel of Maria do Olival, which is dedicated to Mary Magdalene. They dug them up. When nobody knows what happened to them at
Wow.
that point. So they had some sort of vested interest in not only annihilating the Templars, but annihilating every memory of the Templars, and
Even to the point of desecration.
absolutely the Jesuits. I actually found books in the Rosicrucian Library that I researched that that say that what happened in South America was actually, it was beyond, it was genocide of the Templars and any
Yeah.
Masons. They sent Jesuit bands of people into every single country in South America to track down and murder Templar descendants and Masons.
Wow.
And I have a book in the Rosicrucian Library that's this thick. Every single chapter is about another country in South America where they did this.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty powerful.
Wow.
So they not only wanted to, they wanted everybody to forget about the Templars completely.
Yeah.
But then there was that prophecy that they were going to return in 700 years. And they did. And I was actually present for that procession in Tomar when they reunified. They had a huge procession. They all signed a pact. And they had this amazing procession. I was there. It actually brought tears to my eyes. I was actually weeping as I'm walking from the Convent de Cristo down into Tomar to the Church of St. John, and then down to the Chapel of Maria do Olival, where they lit the cross in finale of this procession. It was probably about a 3-hour process, but I was literally weeping as I'm photographing and filming this whole thing, because it was just so powerful to be a part of that reunification. Seeing the Templars reunify.
Yeah.
It was so powerful.
Absolutely. Well, especially with all the work that you've done researching into them, everything else, and to see the fact that there is a modern Templar movement, and it's happening right at the same time that just about this turnover of humanity is happening. It's pretty interesting to see those two things line up.
Right.
That even right now, we're changing as a species. The way that we're connected, the way that we think.
And sometimes it's slower, and then sometimes there's periods that are actually jump-started.
Yeah.
Our evolutionary process is jump-started. We've seen this in our history.
Yeah.
And we're at one of those. We're moving into a new paradigm. But it's our natural evolutionary process as humans, as the species that we are, to continue to evolve. And we will continue to evolve infinitely, which is hard to grasp, but we will. And now that we're moving back up into the Dwapara Yuga, we're moving in with we've now matured and expanded our mental capacity, which we did not have before this yuga began. This yuga has been all about developing the mental and the material plane. We've sunk as far into matter as we can sink. It's basically the story of Sophia sinking into matter and then rising back up and being reunited with the Cristo, right? We're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And again, that is a description of the alchemical process.
Yep, and precisely half of the initiation rite and
Absolutely.
and the message of masonry, the message. I mean, one of my favorites, and I want to say it might be is it the 23rd? I think it might be the 23rd rank of masonry, where you literally find out everything that you've learned before is a lie.
33rd.
Is it the 33rd? Okay. Because I thought that there was one within the royal arc before that where the moment of revelation happened.
Right,
but
and it was the same age that Jesus,
Yeah.
was 33 when he began, and the same age I was when I had my near death.
yeah,
Interesting on that.
yeah.
Right.
Well, where can everybody go to find out more? Where can they go to watch the Templars in Brazil movie? You're working on the second edition of that right
Yes.
now.
Yeah.
That is hugely exciting.
Right, very exciting. But they can go to Gaia. They can watch it on Gaia TV, or they can stream it through
Okay.
that same Gaia thing. They can also go to my website, which is www.templarsinbrazil.com, and get updates on this book that's out. It is available on Amazon.
Yep.
And then they can also find out about the next book that's coming out and the next film that's coming out, and watch the trailer that is already out for the next film.
Awesome. And you also have a tour that you're working on as well.
Yes,
Let
I
everybody
do.
know where they can go to find out about that, where they can go to sign
Well,
up,
they'll be able to
everything
go
else.
to my website once we get it uploaded to the website.
Yep.
But it's going to be in October of 2024, and it's a Grail Quest tour.
Okay.
We're going to be going to all the sites that I know about in Portugal and in France, and we're going to be basically going through the alchemical process.
Awesome.
So-
Awesome. Well, Kathleen, thank you as always for coming on the show.
Yeah,
I
you're
always
welcome.
appreciate our conversations. Your
Yeah,
wealth
I
of
do
knowledge
too.
on this is
Yeah.
absolutely amazing and fantastic. I can't wait to hear you speak tonight. Can't wait to hear you speak on Sunday. So.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it too.
Absolutely. Stay tuned, everybody, for continuing coverage from Stairway to the Stars right here at the Luxor in Las Vegas. We'll be right back after these commercial messages with more from the Curious Realm and Stairway to the Stars right after this.